Good morning or good afternoon. I'm not sure just when this will be played, but nevertheless, I want to thank everybody for an opportunity to make this little telecast. Unfortunately, I was cannot be with you when the sponsors of your program here first asked me to give a little talk at the forum in Grand Island and also the one in Amarillo. I was particularly excited or enthused about the idea of joining you in Grand Island because, you know, Nebraska is still my home state, and irrespective of the whipping that Texas gave Nebraska in the recent football game, why I'm still Nebraska will always be home. Would have given me an opportunity to meet with you firsthand and have a real good visit. But unfortunately, a conflict came up that prevents me from being with you today in person. So we'll try to kind of hit and miss a little program here to maybe send a few messages to you, maybe hopefully stimulate some discussion on your part later on in the program. Well, obviously that's a real long story. I'll try to be kind of brief about it, but I did grow up in Nebraska, in a little town, Bassett, which at the time I was there was about 450 people. And I was a kid that grew up in that little town instead of growing up on a farm. But my father had a filling station, and of course he believed in getting you started pretty young to work. And he always he grew up on a farm himself, and so he really thought it was extremely important that every boy or girl should know how to milk a cow. Simple deal, but no milk a cow. Well, so we started with one cow, and he bought 4 acres of land on the outskirts of Bassett, put up a little barn where we could milk the cow, and then of course one cow led to 2 cows, 3 cows, 4 cows, and finally got up I think around 10 cows. And believe it or not, folks, I was one of these strange persons that really enjoyed milking cows, and I still think there's an awful lot to be said to actually to learn a little cow psychology by milking cows. When you sit down alongside one of them a couple times a day for a good period of time, you're going to learn a lot about the cow. And so it became pretty early that my father could see that I much prefer cattle than the filling station. Didn't like working in the filling station, so it was one of my aspirations to be in the cattle business. I always thought it'd probably be more in the ranching part of it. That was my aspirations, but subsequent events, mainly with having an opportunity to join the Lewis Dinklage operation, started out as a feeder cattle buyer, and then of course evolved into being a partner with Louis in cattle feeding operations. I was down in Texas buying feeder cattle to ship back to Nebraska to our feed yards there, and at that particular time we were still shipping cattle by rail, believe it or not. And I happened to be down at the Railroad stockyards in Hereford, Texas, and weighing up and going to ship a rancher's cattle that we had bought. And while we were there, a train pulled in that had been made up in Amarillo. And that train was practically all made up of either grain sorghum, milo, or feeder cattle destined to the Imperial Valley of California. And I kept looking at that train. Finally I told that rancher, I said, this is all wrong. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, you're exporting the 2 main resources that would support and build a cattle feeding operation. You've got your feeder cattle here, you've got a surplus, of grain, sorghum, feed grain, and so forth, and it should be utilized here, and feed the cattle here instead of shipping them to California. He said, well, I said, what do you think? And he said, well, it's a great idea, but he said, we need somebody like you to come down and show us how to do it. And so when I got back to Wisner and visit with Mr. Dinklage, I asked him about the idea of establishing a feed yard in the Texas Panhandle, particularly in that area. He said, it's a good idea. He said, it worked. He said, I said, well, and I said, would you mind if I go on down there, back down there, buy some land, get an organization put together? And he said, not at all. So that's how I got to Texas. Well, we will maintain a major position as far as a country that's producing high quality fed beef. Whether it be 80–85%, I wouldn't guarantee one another, but I know we will be the predominant producer. And the reason for that is that we have all of the ingredients, to produce high quality beef. We've got the feed grains, we've got the feeding facilities, the feed yards, and then but most important, we have the right genetics in our cow herd here in the United States to produce high quality beef. And that's one of the reasons when you look around and say, well, who would be the big competitor? Who could move you out of that position of being number one? And the country that immediately comes to mind, Brazil. Brazil has the feeder cattle. They have a large cattle herd, larger cow herd, than we have here in the United States. Feed grains, they've got surplus of feed grains that they export now. And they have the capability of producing much more. They've got packing plants, so forth. So why, you ask yourself the question, why couldn't they be, a big competitor, maybe even move the United States out? And it's the genetics. The national herd in Brazil, for example, is mainly made up of Nelore cattle, which are a Zebu, Bos Indicus cattle, and the cattle that will not produce the type of carcass that requires to make high quality beef. So, and I think they're really handicapped climatically, that they're almost committed to to a large percentage of the Zebu or the Nelore type cattle. And the English breeds, particularly the Angus cattle, are not as well adapted a lot of those areas that they as the Nelore cattle. So I guess in kind of taking another look at that, is that I think we can still maintain a very strong position in producing high quality fed beef, but it's mainly because of the genetics we have here in the cow herd, and mainly the Angus breed. First of all, you have to be an optimist to even think about feeding cattle. It's a tough business, and I think if you don't have the commitment from the standpoint that that things are going to be okay, and that you shouldn't even enter into the business, it's going to be tough. I think that probably the next 10 years we're going to see continue to see a lot of change, and a lot of that change isn't going to be too good. It looks as though we perhaps have topped out in terms of the number of cows. The old traditional cattle cycle seems like it's a thing of the past, and if the cow herd continues to get smaller, I think it'd be a very alarming thing for all of us in the business. Hopefully the people will continue to like beef. It's number one in the meat, protein, and so on and so forth. And you keep in mind that as a cattle feeder, you're a margin operator. Hopefully that your margins, you'll be able to, through your expertise in marketing and so on and so forth, you'll be able to maintain those necessary margins to stay in business. Actually, some of the biggest challenges one of the biggest challenges that we have today facing this industry is our federal government, our national government. And it's crazy, fellas, when you stop to think about it, is that instead of having a government in Washington that should be helping us, we've got a government in Washington, that's against us and keeps throwing rocks in front of us. I'll give you 3 examples of that. First of all, the EPA, as we know, is trying to come with dust standards, and those standards, as they're proposing right now, would almost make it impossible, you know, for cattle feeders, let alone, you know, even for farmers, you know, creating dust, you know, and trying to put in a crop, and they just seem to be totally devoid of, you know, any consideration what some of those standards, you know, might mean to us. So we got the EPA on our neck. We've got the E15. The most recent thing, you know, is the ethanol situation. Instead of actually from recognizing that, you know, that we're in a critical position insofar as our supply of corn in this country. Our ending stocks, you know, are the lowest that they've been in years. The ethanol industry now is taking 1/3 of the crop, and they seem to be completely here oblivious of what that shortage of corn could mean, you know, in rising food prices. Certainly make it a lot more difficult for us, and so that's the second thing. And then, of course, the third thing is this so-called GIPSA, you know, rule, the regulation, the proposed regulation the packers and stockyards have put out for comments. And that silly thing is probably, if it ever comes out in the final form that it's been presented, and that would actually be one of the ruinations of our industry as we see it today. And all the progress that we've made, you know, in the last 25 or 30 years in producing better cattle, using better genetics, and coming up with a type of beef that is going to, you know, meet the standard, the gold standard in the world today, is going to set it back, because these programs, that special programs, utilizing those genetics and so on, you know, have to go out the window. And so I would encourage all of you to really familiarize yourself with the proposals of that regulation, and then sit down and, you know, and make a comment. And so, gentlemen, I'd kind of leave you with that comment that, and here during your forum deliberations here and so on and so forth, please get in and discuss this GIPSA rule. We desperately need to have modifications on that and so forth, and really try to get our government, you know, in a position to help us instead of hurting us. Well, I can't help but be optimistic, you know, on the man with our quality product. Beef is the chosen, you know, meat protein. Everybody likes it. Unfortunately, I always say that we should. People don't eat as much as they probably like to eat because they can't afford it, and so we need to be always cognizant of our costs. And instead of trying to do all kinds of promotion things to raise the price of the beef, we should be magnifying or centralizing our efforts, you know, on ways to produce it cheaper. That's very easy for me to talk about that, because I have said many times publicly and otherwise that the certified Angus beef program should take a lot of credit for the people that instituted it, because it's the first branded product that's been successful, you know, in our business today. And it's phenomenal with the reception that it's gotten, and it's been a great thing all the way around, not only to increase and promote the demand for our product, but also to give the breeders and of the Angus cattle and so on and so forth the necessary incentives to keep on buying better bulls, be very cognizant of what type of carcasses their cattle are producing.